This is video 2 of the Psych 642 categorical data assignment. I'm going to pick up where I left off at the end of the last video with conducting the two chi-squared tests on the variables from the two significant two-way interactions. So the first one is the prayer and class interaction. So I'm going to use the xtabs function to create a contingency table that includes just those two variables, so that I can then use the cross table function to run the chi-squared test. You can see I'm using the new contingency table as the data. And then all of these are just options for what's going to show up in the cross tables. So I want my expected frequencies, as well as I also want the information for the Fisher exact test, the chi-square test, as well as the standardized residuals. So no, that's not the right one. The standardized residuals. So all of that is clearly laid out here in the code. So I'm going to go ahead and run that, and we get the results of this, which once again confirms that the relationship between these two variables is significant. There's also an odds ratio given in this output, which I'll talk about whenever I get to the interpretation section. But I'm also going to look at the mosaic plot using the mosaic plot function, just to look at the residuals and the information of the frequencies in a graphical form. So you can see from this graph, the biggest thing that stands out is that those who said they were lower class were less likely to pray only less than once a week. So that's the biggest kind of breakdown of this significant chi-square relationship. This is the significant aspect of this that we can see from the standardized residuals. And then moving on to the other chi-square, once again going to create the contingency table and then run the chi-squared analysis, which once again we can see confirms that the relationship between class and happiness is significant. And then we also get the odds ratio here. And then looking at the cross table, we can see 3 of the standardized residuals should be significant. So I'm going to look at the mosaic plot to make it a little bit easier to look at. Here we can see that it's more likely that lower class individuals will be not too happy, and less likely that lower class individuals will be pretty happy, and that middle class individuals will be not too happy. So now I'm going to show where the information from my summary of findings came from out of the output. So the information in the summary of findings came from several places throughout the output. So The first is the information on the final model. So this came from the three-way model, which we can see here. The likelihood ratio that's being reported in the summary of findings came from here, showing that that three-way model where the three-way interaction had been taken out was the last model to not come out significantly different from the from the model that preceded it. So that ended up with us having a final model that retained two-way interactions as well as main effects. So this also indicated that two of the two-way interactions were significant, which I already showed. The prayer by class interaction was significant, which we can see from here, and this is where the information here comes from. We see the change was 6.51 with the change of degrees of freedom of 1, and then a p-value of 0.01. And then the second one that came up significant, class by happiness. That information was drawn from here. The 32.81 was the change in the chi-square between the models. Change in the degrees of freedom was 1, and the significance was less than 0.001. It was very the p-value was very low there. So the information for the chi-squared tests came from the Pearson's chi-squared test, which is reported in the summary of findings for the relationship between class and how often he or she prays is reported here. You see the degrees of freedom, the chi-square value, and the p-value all come from here. The odds ratio that gets reported there comes from here. What I did for the write-up was I did 1 divided by the odds ratio in order to kind of flip that around to a whole number so that it would be easier to interpret and understand, and just said that it was that many times lower rather than higher, since it's a decimal of less than 1. And then for the second chi-squared, the information came from the same place, Pearson's chi-squared test, and then the odds ratio. And that wraps up the final assignment for Psych 642, the categorical data assignment. So overall, I did find 2 significant two-way interactions, broke those down further to understand them using chi-squared and odds ratio, and came up with an understanding that there is a relationship, it seems, between class and how often someone prays, and also a relationship between class and how happy someone is.